first speaker for the day. Let's welcome our first speaker would be Jared Roller. Jared Roller Rouge Kerr. Wow, this is full name. Okay, and also like Francis Concha, development manager, I Am Future, also to come up on stage with the title Rolling to the Future of GameFi. Hey, this is the only lady who was laughing to all my jokes yesterday's gala dinner.
Sound check. Hello. Good morning, Singapore. Okay, so yeah, I'm sure there are more people coming, but maybe they're just, they sleep late because of the gala last night. So how are you all doing today? Good? Okay, I'm seeing pretty faces and handsome faces all the way from here, but okay, for some people, okay, now. Anyways, before we begin, we are very lucky because our brand ambassador straight from London, Mr. Jared Roller Rouge, will be joining us today. But before that, let me give you what Metaverse or GameFi and Meta Rollers is all about. So, as we all know it, we live in a world where innovation happens almost every day. From the creation of the wheel to the revolution of artificial intelligence, human beings have continued to improve. They continue to have transcended even beyond what our ancestors would have ever imagined. Today, in this day and age, we stand as witnesses to another revolution that history books will be talking about in the years to come. We are fortunate to be standing in this very moment in time, where the unlikeliest of factors come together hand in hand to pave way for new beginnings. Case in point, finance and gaming. If you would have told me 6 or 10 years ago that gaming, one of the most touted hobbies before, and some people might say that if you'll continue to do that, you'll end up living in your mother's basement, would be one of the best sources of income these days. I mean, who wouldn't want that? Imagine yourself sitting in front of the computer, playing your favorite game, cold drinks on the side, and earning money at the same time. So here's the rub. GameFi is exactly like that. It is the mix, the combination, and just like a Miley Cyrus song, it is the best of both worlds. Okay, so no Hannah Montana fans in the house, I get it. But in GameFi, there are endless opportunities. And as a matter of fact, in the traditional gaming setup, the players don't have any abilities to own in-game assets. With GameFi, tokens related to blockchain-based games are blurring the boundary between in-game assets, in-game resources, and real-world assets. In a Metaverse survey, 40% of the respondents said that they are interested in the gaming and earning abilities of the metaverse, while the 11% said that they're more interested in the earning side of it, while the majority of 49% stated that they are interested in the gaming experience itself. So as we can all see from these statistics alone, that GameFi would be beneficial for all the three parties involved. So, since I am talking about GameFi so much, how about we put its concept in the real world? So, I am from the Philippines, and in the Philippines, the game, I know you'll know this one, Axie Infinity has taken the world by storm. So it is a game where people can own NFTs and through axes, and they fight against other players. And as a matter of fact, during that time, 10% of the Philippine population played that game. And of those 10%, most of them came from the marginalized sector of the society. So it became a way for the poorest, not the poorest, but for the poor people to actually earn money through gaming, through their phone, without leaving their homes. Because in the Philippines, it is very hard to find a job without a college degree, I tell you that. Even the cashiers in the convenience store, you need a college degree in order to get in that job. So through GameFi, through play-to-earn games, it actually provided opportunities for people in the Philippines to improve their living situation. Now, I would like to introduce a new way to apply GameFi. A new game that combines dexterity, creativity, and of course, resourcefulness from the user. A game that'll take you into new adventure, and a game that can play in worlds that no one could even imagine. So enter Meta Rollers, and that's what we're here. Meta Rollers will be a stepping stone towards the transition from Web 2 to Web 3, since the game is very easy to play and can be played by children to the older generations. And imagine the possible outcomes and imagine the world created by Web 3. We have endless possibilities. Innovation happens almost every day, and while we journey onwards to what other things the future may give us, we have this opportunity. We have this window to look at the future with hopes that this can truly change the world. So I hope you will hop into this adventure with me, and I say, let's roll with Meta Rollers. So before we end, we have our brand ambassador, Straight, who traveled as far from London just to be with us today, and he will be telling more about the game. And as someone who recently transitioned from Web 2 to Web 3, he will share his personal experiences with us and his thoughts about Meta Rollers. Ladies and gentlemen, Jared, take it away.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. How are you guys doing this morning? Come on, let me hear you. How are you doing this morning? I literally just woke up, and I was told I was giving a speech, so I had to skate here and get here quickly. But when it comes to Meta Rollers, there's a long backstory, and I just wanted to give you guys kind of that trail of how I got involved with it and what it is and what I am to this brand. Long story short, I'm a professional roller skater born in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I travel the world now. I host events. I make content. I do everything skating. I teach. I run social medias for rinks and like bring them into the modern age of social media and using reels and TikToks to engage with their following and the media and stuff. So I started doing that because when COVID hit, I, at the time, was training for the Olympics. I was a long jumper for Team Canada, and COVID changed my life because it put everything on pause. It put the world on pause. The real world was on pause, and all my ambitions were halted. My self-identity lost. I didn't know what I was, who I was. I was questioning a lot, and I go into my garage randomly, find my dad's old roller skates. I put them on. I start skating in the street. I love how it makes me feel, and instantly I'm just hooked. And then I start talking about it to other people. I start seeing ads for it because the government's watching us, so they know. I'm talking about roller skating. I start seeing ads. I start seeing creators that are in that niche and in that community that I never really was exposed to. It's just like the crypto community. If you're outside of it looking in, you don't really know much about it. I personally am in that category until I was contacted by them. But I learned about this community. I became immersed in it. I fell in love with it, and I fell in love with skating. And the more I traveled, the more people I met, the more I experienced, the greater my passion grew. And that led me to Meta Rollers. I built up a decent following on Instagram, TikTok, building my YouTube, Facebook, just using social mediums, making content centered around skating. It gave me a focus, it gave me a niche, and I was reached out to by Maya, one of the founders. And at first, I was really skeptical because you check your DMs, there's a lot of stuff that's like, you're not sure if this is legit. Like people asking if you need a sugar daddy. Like there's everything on there. But I had a talk with her. I discussed my vision for what I'm doing, and she discussed her vision for Meta Rollers. And I could see that in the digital world, it like coincided. And that was really exciting to hear someone talk about it passionately. And she wanted me to be the brand ambassador. Well, at first it was more of a minor role, but over time, as we got to know each other and I learned more about Meta Rollers, she learned about the skating community, it kind of became like a yin and yang where we worked together to basically build this thing. I have no experience previously in Web 2, Web 3. I was strictly an athlete, I was strictly a skater, and this kind of opened my eyes to this world that I'm now learning, and I'm here at a blockchain fest in Singapore. I love the fact that it incorporates what I love about skating into the game, where there's different cityscapes that you can skate through. There's very customizable like features and characters that you can personalize it. And as you can see how I'm dressed, I like to dress how I want to dress. I like my skates to look how they want, my wheels, my bearings, every minute detail of my ensemble and what I'm wearing is me. And that's something that she really stressed to incorporate into the game to get people feeling special and feeling personal to, and like personally connected to Meta Rollers. And yeah, I look at my like life now, and it's something that I never would have expected. I'm, as I said, traveling, skating, and that's an aspect that was incorporated. The traveling, the skating, the meeting new people. It's not just about playing to earn. That was something they really stressed, because if you make it about money, it saps the fun out of it. You're just going to have people that are doing it, and it's going to feel more like a job or like you're working. But it was important to make something that people genuinely enjoy. Yes, some people will want to focus on the play to earn, and that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. But me, I'm in it for the vibes. I like jam skating. I'm a dance skater. So being able to have that aspect and that freedom and that fun and the vibes is important. And yeah, that's my role as the brand ambassador for Meta Rollers. It started out smaller, became bigger. Now my face is on the wall over there, which is crazy to me. I produce some of the scores that are in the background of the game. That like came about over time. I did some vocal work where I'm just doing like little vocal shouts, saying cool, saying a bunch of random stuff to signify like achievements in the game. And as my role increased, I saw more and more the vision and the value behind these types of projects that incorporate gaming and GameFi and combining crypto with my passion, two things that I'm now very passionate about. I'm Roller Rouge, and that's my speech. Thank you.
Round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen, everyone, to Jared Roller, Ruch Kerr, and Francis Concha. A big round of applause. Thank you very much. There you have it. That was our first topic for the day, rolling to the future of GameFi. Okay, so next, let's welcome the co-founder at CFTE, Hui Nguyen Triu, with the topic of the global map of blockchain projects. Let's give a big round of applause and welcome Hui Nguyen Triu.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi everyone, it's a real pleasure to be with you today. And in the next 15 minutes, I will share with you the research that we have done on blockchain projects globally. And as part of this research, we have created a taxonomy of blockchain projects and a way to categorize all those projects globally. So this is what I'll go through over the next 15 minutes. You'll see it's quite complex because what we're trying to do really is to categorize finance in 15 minutes, which is quite challenging. If there was one thing I would like you to remember, is really this framework. Because there's a lot of things happening in blockchain at the moment. It's really hard to know what is happening today, what will happen in the future. So this framework will help you to have a very simple way to understand not only what is happening today, but also in the future. So first, let's start. Let me introduce myself. I'm Hui, co-founder of CFT, Center for Finance, Technology and Entrepreneurship. We're a global fintech education platform in London and Singapore. I'm based in London. We had the chance to work with a lot of financial institutions, central banks, regulators, governments around the world, so that gives us a good idea of what is happening. And that's also one of the purposes of this discussion on blockchain. First, a bit of background. Why this research? So this research was started on a joint project that we're doing with SMU Academy, which is an online certification which is called Blockchain and Digital Assets for Financial Services. As part of this certification, we wanted to make sure that we had real-life applications, not hype, not things which we read in newspapers, which might be true or not, but real-life applications. And so in order to do this, we interviewed 100 experts globally. We analyzed hundreds of applications in blockchain, and we tried to understand what was behind. This is where we found that it is actually really, really complex. There's a lot of applications out there, and so there was a need to create what we call a taxonomy. There was a need to create a categorization of those blockchain projects. This is what I will show you. But first, before we jump into the categorization, there's a question which is quite important, which is, why now? Why are we discussing about this now? If you spend time learning about this topic of blockchain and digital assets, should you spend the time? Should you spend the time now? Should you have spent the time 5 years ago? Should you spend the time in the next 5 years? So really 2 points which are important. First one, cryptocurrencies. The crypto market over the last year has been extremely volatile, up, down. All the stories. It was discussed yesterday. We don't really care about this. We don't really care about this because the crypto market, as we've said for the last 5 years, it's about speculative asset class. It can go up, can go down. It might be led by fear. It might be led by greed. But that's not really what we're talking about. What we're talking about is actually the real transformation of financial services. What is happening behind? What are all those projects which are having a real impact? What kind of projects? For example, this project here in Singapore, which you might have heard about, which is Project Orchid. Project Orchid, project led by MAS, DBS, Grab, Temasek, which is about purpose-bound money. If you were at the Singapore FinTech Festival a few months ago, you might have been able to use Project Orchid, a really interesting example of a different type of money. What kind of projects also? For example, in Europe, the European Investment Bank that issued a bond on the tokenization platform of Goldman Sachs. Or what kind of projects? This kind of projects, for example, the reserve liability network between the Federal Reserve and 12 banks in the US. It can seem quite complex. It is really complex, actually, because we're talking about the transformation of financial services. But while over the last few years, all the news were on cryptos and NFTs and speculation, the reality is that in the background, there were a lot of transformation happening, a lot of projects at the infrastructure level that was undertaken by central banks, governments, financial institutions, but also Web3 entrepreneurs. So this is what I would like to tell you about, which is what are those projects and what is happening. So when we talk about projects and categorization, we'll talk about taxonomy, we'll talk about framework. And if you do a very quick Google search on, for example, map of blockchain projects, what will you find? You will find those kind of maps of blockchain projects. Really, really useful because you'll see that there's a lot of information in there. And people have very different ways to approach this. Here, for example, on the first one, they would have different types of sectors. They would go from fintech into shared data, authentication, for example, others. And they would just list a lot of different companies. This one, in terms of the blockchain map, you see, is much, much more complex. It tries to show the complexity of the ecosystem. It goes from, for example, in the middle, you'd have Bitcoin, and linked to Bitcoin, you'd have smart contracts, decentralized apps, etc. Then, for example, this one, you can't really see it from where you are, but it's about a very specific subsector, which is capital markets. And in capital markets, it would list it by the different functions of capital markets. So that could be, for example, on primary market, secondary market, etc. And this one does a bit of everything, where it has 4 different subsections and then a lot of different companies. Very, very useful to have a list of those companies. 2 challenges that you will see in general. The first one is that we're talking about finance, and finance is very complex. There are very, very few people who understand everything about financial services, from, for example, asset management to retail banking to private banking to security services, etc. So it's very, very complex. And at the same time, the other challenge is that it's changing all the time. You might remember a few years ago, everybody was talking about ICOs. Not a lot of people are talking about ICOs anymore, but now a lot of people would be talking about NFTs, for example. So 2 challenges. And so when you look at this, for us, from an educator standpoint, there's a big problem. And the big problem is that if I show you, for example, one of those, and in 10 minutes, I ask you again, can you tell me what was in the map? Except, for people with very, very high IQ, that's really hard, actually. That's really hard to remember. It's very, very complex. So what we wanted to do is to find something that was easy for our participants to make sense of the trends both today and in the future. So I'll show you the way that we have done it. You see, it's very anti-climatic, because after all this research, we've spent actually weeks interviewing hundreds of people, working on hundreds of projects. You see that it is actually really simple. And that was the objective. This is what I would like you to remember. This is our taxonomy of blockchain projects. And with this taxonomy, it should give you a very good framework to think of what is happening. You will see that there are 7 verticals and 4 horizontals. The 7 verticals are really what you can think of in terms of sectors. I think there's 7, yeah? So that's what you can think of in terms of sectors or customers. First one is on the retail side. Retail finance is people like you and me. This is for individuals. Corporate finance, it's for organizations, companies. Could be large corporates, it could be SMEs, for example. Capital markets and exchanges tends to be for institutionals, those professional traders, for example. Investments linked to asset management activities, insurance. Non-financial, extremely broad. We wanted to make sure that it was here because blockchain is not just about finance. Non-financial can go from retail to telecom and media to fashion, for example. And of course, last but not least, would be governments and regulators. Those are the 7 different verticals. Then we have 4 horizontals. First one, which are customer-facing. Those activities that really touch those participants, clients, either retail, corporates, etc. So customer-facing. Then infrastructure would be a second horizontal. Risk and compliance. And then finally, environment, social, and governance. So this is the way that we have structured the taxonomy at the moment. It might change a bit in the future, but broadly, it is something which is quite easy to remember. One of the challenges still is that you will see that a lot of those activities that I will show you do not fall just into one. Just like, for example, in traditional finance. If you look at a large bank, it's very unlikely they would just do, for example, retail banking. They would do retail banking and corporate banking and investment, etc. This is the same. The other thing is that when you look at this graph or this table, you see that there's no mention of DeFi or CeFi. It is on purpose. It is on purpose because a lot of this applies equally to CeFi or DeFi. And secondly, because the trend, in our opinion, is that it is more than just black and white of CeFi or DeFi, and at some point you will have some gray area, which are much more hybrid between CeFi and DeFi. So let me show you what kind of activities we have across all of this. First, customer-facing. Customer-facing on the retail side, there's a lot. Here's just a few different examples. There's a lot because this is how it started. This is how it started with, for example, cryptocurrencies. Cryptocurrencies was a lot on the retail side. Stablecoins, a lot on the retail side. It has an impact also on corporates. First, because you have a few corporates, Tesla, for example, that invest in cryptocurrencies, but you also have corporates and retailers that accepted cryptocurrencies as a means of payment. It also goes across capital markets and exchanges, of course, because you'd have exchanges to trade, buy, and sell those cryptocurrencies, and as an investment or speculation for people to put money in there. So that's an example for cryptocurrencies and stable coins. FX, you will see, is a very, very large part of it. I'll talk about it in a few minutes. If we go more into the non-financial side, non-financial, you would have, for example, NFTs. NFTs, of course, could be seen as a financial instrument. The reality, however, is that today it's being used much, much more, not just for speculation, but for other activities on non-financial. We can think of, for example, fashion, metaverse, etc. So this is a lot of the activities we see on the customer-facing side. Most of the activities that we see in blockchain tend to be at the infrastructure level. And infrastructure, you see that it's starting to be a bit more complex. A lot, for example, I talked about exchanges. Exchanges, you'd have centralized exchanges that goes through customer-facing into infrastructure also. Decentralized exchanges, DEX, for example, would be here. But we'll see that actually that's not most of the activities. We have a lot of other activities, for example, on tokenization, whether it's called bond tokenization or financial asset tokenization, a very, very large sector. We'll talk about it. Or, for example, on the insurance side, we're starting to see more projects on automation, for example, of policies. There's something that we can't miss into this infrastructure level. It's, of course, on the last column, which is government and regulators, which is CBDCs. Compliance and risk. I think if there's one which would be the most important by far, that's cybersecurity. That was one of the topics of a panel yesterday. Cybersecurity goes pretty much across everything. It's important in a digital world in general. It is even more important in this world. So cybersecurity would be one. Shared ledgers is a topic that we see very, very often across all industries. That can go from a KYC utility, so utility, basically a shared ledger for know your customer to make sure that the different participants have information about their customers, into shared ledgers, for example, on health insurance, to be able to follow the process of claims handling. And then finally, for ESG, we have a lot on the ESG side. We have a lot that goes from carbon tokenization into ESG data reporting, for example. So as you can see, we started from something that was quite simple, which had 7 verticals and 4 horizontals. We actually can add a lot of different sub-activities in there. And the reason why it's complex is that it's the complexity, of course, of financial services. Let me share with you 4 trends which I think are really important, which you can't miss in there. The first one, I would say, has to be CBDCs, central bank digital currencies. Why? Because at the core, it's about the reinvention of money. And whether we talk about the digital pound, which you might have seen, the Bank of England has started a consultation on the digital pound, or the digital dollar, or the e-Singapore dollar. You have 100+ projects in the world of central banks and government working on the next version of